couple of things that I think jump out at me as powerful things to consider. One, consider whether the thing you're working on is what you are put on planet Earth to do in this moment. Not necessarily for the rest of your life, but in this moment. It's really, really powerful if you're working on the thing that you were put on planet Earth to do. And it's really challenging if you're working on something that you weren't put on planet Earth to do. So think hard about that. And if the thing you're doing is what you were put on this planet to do, that's awesome.
Welcome back. This is From Startup to Grown Up. My name is Alyssa Cohn, and today I'm thrilled to welcome the one and only Brad Feld to the podcast. Brad is the co-founder of Techstars, a well-known founder and investor, a prolific blogger, and the author of 9 books, all focused on how to learn what you need to learn to be a great founder. Brad and I talked about his 2-year hibernation, how he put a box around work and devoted time to the 4 things he'd realized that he truly loves. We also talked about what it's like to go through what Brad calls the awkward teenage years of Techstars and what he learned from that experience. Now, of course, we also cover his new book, Give First, a very practical take on mentorship as a long game and a non-transactional philosophy. We talk about how to be truly helpful to others, how to ask better questions, be responsive, and embrace randomness. Brad also talked about the need for harmony rather than balance and how to make a little more investment in Planet You. It is so great to hear from someone who has Brad's breadth of experience in entrepreneurship and investing, so please enjoy my great conversation with Brad Feld. Brad, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you today.
I am delighted to be here.
Thank you, Brad. You are a founder and investor, a co-founder of Techstars, very well-known accelerator, really one of the first accelerators out there. You write a well-regarded blog, and you're kind of a big deal. You're kind of a celebrity, Brad, and the world wants to know, why have you been hibernating?
Well, I'm kind of a big deal in my own head, right? Are we all the hero of our own stories? I hibernated 2 years ago because I was just kind of sick and tired of everything. And mostly sick and tired of having a public profile. So what had happened was, for a very long time, I blogging, writing, doing podcasts, doing videos, traveling a lot. Pre-COVID, I traveled constantly, 75% of the time. With COVID, I stopped traveling because we all did. And I decided I wasn't going to travel for work anymore. So I just stopped. And, the world sort of adjusted to remote. And so I was able to sort of live things out that way. But I continued to have this daily writing habit on my blog and still doing lots of podcast interviews and stuff like that. I was just tired of it. And I just decided I needed a break. So I stopped. Now, I stopped not in the way I think some people stop, which is to write the gratuitous blog post saying, I've decided to stop blogging now for a while, in their own self-important way. I just stopped. I stopped doing it all. I just shifted from what I describe as default yes mode when somebody would ask if I wanted to do something public to default no mode. And every now and then I do something, but it was really every now and then. And it was awesome. And so I had this 2 years of just being able to do my thing, continue to work on all the normal stuff that I was doing, but just eliminated completely this idea of having a public profile.
Well, I guess I have 2 questions. What was your day-to-day like when you were hibernating?
Well, interesting shift. So it turns out that if you don't do all this extra shit, the work that I have probably fits within about 40 hours a week. So, I still had pre-scheduled days for my normal work. I'm on a bunch of boards and stuff with Foundry and stuff with Techstars, but I just had no extracurricular work stuff. So all the extracurricular work stuff just went away. That allowed me then to kind of have a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday work day. And I would limit the amount of calls in any day. So I sort of started my calls at around noon. And I would do calls from noon to 5. So I was fully scheduled from noon to 5 every day. And on other days, if I had a board meeting in the morning or maybe go later in the afternoon because of time zones or whatever, I have some of that. But between 9 and 5, I kind of was able to do all the work that I had. And so in the mornings, I would exercise, spend time with Amy. We have morning coffee every morning, something we started doing a while ago. So whoever wakes up second, we spend the first 30 minutes of every day just having coffee together. It used to be her. She used to be the one that woke up second. Now it's me. And then
that's your new hibernation mode.
Well, no, it'd been, I think just age. I used to be that person that woke up at 5 a.m. with an alarm clock. It's been a long time now. It's been 12 years since I stopped using an alarm clock. Now I wake up whenever I wake up. And so I usually just, I get whatever sleep I need every night. I wake up at whatever, 6:37, 7:30, 8. Amy still wakes up. I mean, she didn't wake up with an alarm clock. She's just a very early riser. I do email. I'd have some phone calls that would be random occasionally, but most of my phone calls are scheduled. I'd work till 5. Again, I'd work out in the morning, and then I'd stop. And then at the end of the days, both Amy and I are huge readers. And by hibernating, we also stopped being social, or at least I stopped being social. We go out to dinner with friends occasionally, but I just stopped doing anything that was evening-related events. And so I usually read about 2 books a week. When I'm in a good reading rhythm, I come in and out of rhythms, but normally it's about 2 books a week. But I was probably reading 3-4 books a week for a while. And, we watched all the TV we wanted to watch, hang out and spend time together. But it was really a very different modality for 2 solid years. And then the last 6 months of it, which started at the end of last year, over the holidays, I used to be really grumpy over the holidays. And I just whine about being a Jewish kid that grew up without Christmas, and Christmas sucks, and I don't get presents, and boo-hoo me. And I stopped doing that a number of years ago, and now I just realize I'm depressed at the end of the year. And so I would, change my behavior so I would deal with whatever the end of the year exhaustion was. Slow down and whatever the tempo changes. This year I started vibe coding before it was called vibe coding. I used to write software professionally back in the 80s and 90s. And I just downloaded Cursor, which is one of the tools, and just started writing software again in that extra blocks of time in the evening. And it's been fascinating and really fun to be, I've always written a bunch of books and used to write software. Now I'm writing books and software again. And so that was, that's what I did. So my job has gone from being, a 100-hour-a-week job to an 80-hour-a-week job, where probably 40 hours of those 80 hours was all kinds of stuff, running around, social, hunting new deals, talking, being with people, social, extracurriculars, et cetera. And now I'm just not doing any of it.
So it sounds like your version of hibernating was almost just like loosening up your schedule and giving yourself maybe some breathing room. And in the breathing room, you kind of learned, quote unquote, you played with, let's say, vibe coding and did more reading. And it sounds like you just gave yourself more spaciousness. Is that right?
For sure. But some of it was a version of that. I would say I put a box around work. So I'm about to turn 60, and Amy and I talked very clearly about being in the third of life. And, there are lots of things about the day-to-day work that I do that I enjoy, but there's plenty of things about it that I'm not interested in after 40 years of doing it. And I'm also in a place in life where the phrase I'll use is I'm not striving. I'll accomplish more stuff, but I don't need more of anything. I don't need more money. I don't need more power. I don't need more success. And so I'm not defining work success from that frame of reference, and I'm not defining life success as more of that stuff. And what I wanted to try to do with a hibernation was circumscribe or contain the amount of my life that I was spending on work-related stuff so I could explore other things. Also knowing that in the modality that I was in as a venture capital investor and as somebody who'd started companies and as somebody who was writing publicly all around technology and stuff like that, the work could just expand to fill all available time. So I wanted to have some space to redefine what that meant. And then the last is Amy and I both love to be with each other. Dinner with another couple is great, but once it gets bigger than 4 people, I'm not very interested. And I love to be alone, but so much of my adult life has not been that. And I just wanted to reset on a bunch of things so that I could go back to that kind of way of living as I'm getting older.
Mm-hmm. And right. And it's sort of like, I sort of think of it as like the next third of your life now being a blank canvas that you can then paint on. Has it come up for you what you think that next third wants to be?
No, I have no idea. And I'm just letting it go wherever it goes. I do know that in the context of the last 2 years and having a reset and doing the work that I do, I did realize that there's only really 4 things that I love and plenty of people that I love, but only 4 things that I love. And there's a lot of things I like, but I wasn't defining what I love and I wasn't orienting my time around what I love. And there's plenty of things that I like, so it would crowd out my ability to spend time on the things I love. The things I love are 1, spending time with Amy. 2nd, I love running. 3rd, I love reading. And reading for me is the way I learn. I don't learn by watching. I don't learn by listening. I don't learn by, sitting in a classroom. I learn by reading. And then the last thing that I love to do is to write. And for writing, for me, I've defined that as not just nonfiction, but also code and also fiction. And so like the act of creative writing of those things is in my love category. So orienting more of my time around that. And you here and there, I don't love travel. I don't love eating out at fancy restaurants. I don't love big events. I don't love being in the spotlight. I like some of those things, but I don't love them. And so that, if anything, that's what the big shift was. And I don't love making new investments. I do like very much supporting others and helping others be successful, but I wouldn't put that in my love category anymore either. Right? So it's this interesting dynamic of being able to continue to spend a lot of time on the stuff I like, but carving out and making more room to experiment with the stuff I love as I wander into this later stage of life.
Right. And putting the big rocks in first.
Yeah. It's a good way to say it.
Yeah. So one of the things that emerged one way or the other from this hibernation, and I'd love to hear kind of the journey back, but was a writing project. And you gave birth to this book called Give First. And I know that obviously it's about mentorship, and it's also a philosophy, the Give First philosophy, which I think that you've done a beautiful job explaining, and I'd love to hear you talk about it. But like, if I'm not mistaken, your Give First was on the little bit the back burner, and maybe it reemerged during this period of hibernation. Is that what happened?
Yeah. I wrote the first draft of this book about 3 years ago, and I don't remember exact time that I ended it, but it was in sort of the tail end of COVID-ish was when I finished a draft. It's my 9th book. I've been thinking about this book for a while, so, written a lot of blog stuff around it, but I decided to put it into a book. When I finished the first draft, I did what I do with each draft when I do a first draft, which is I send it out to about 25, 30 people. And I basically just share a document with everybody. So it's a very open feedback loop. Some people just send me email feedback. Some people print it out and scribble stuff. Some people comment in the Google Doc, but it's not like a careful, curated thing. And it's a pretty broad group of people. And I got a bunch of feedback, I would say, in 3 categories. One category is the feedback category I always get, which is lots of specific things to, clarify this, this seems stupid. I don't understand what you're trying to do here, and that kind of stuff. The 2 broader feedback points were, 1, Brad, you took 2 concepts and you jammed them together in 2 separate books. And it's kind of like that book you read, like you start reading it and you get halfway through and then all of a sudden the pages are upside down backwards. Yeah. And you turn the book over and it's like in the mirror image and then you read the book that way. It's like, I just had 2 books I jammed together. And that was the concept of Give First and the concept of mentorship. And so I hadn't really woven those 2 things together. That's not a new problem for me. I had that problem in the Startup Community Way, the other book we talked about, and I've had that problem with other books where I really had to refactor the book. I sort of finished the first draft and then just had to take all the pieces and toss it on the ground and reorganize it. And the writing after that's very significant because even though you have a lot of the book written, now you have to like rewrite all the connective tissue and make it make sense. It's a fun, like if you refactor a book that's from a draft, it's kind of fun because you've done most of the bulky writing, but it's hard. The other was, feedback was some version of not enough Brad stories, like too much stories about Techstars, too many things that are not you, your voice. I did not want to write a memoir. This was very explicit when I started out to do this, not a memoir, but I wanted to incorporate a bunch of my own experience because one of the key parts of being a mentor is not to tell people what to do, but to give examples from your own experience to illustrate a point. So I gave a lot of examples to illustrate the points, but many of them were from my own experience. They were just sort of generic Techstars things or a Techstars thing I was aware of or some other thing I was aware of. So those two things were a bunch of work. And I knew I had a lot of work to do. So that was kind of piece one. Piece of like, oh shit, there's real work here. Piece two was, I said at the beginning, I was kind of sick and tired of a lot of stuff, especially what was going on around tech, sort of broadly writ. There were some behavioral things I didn't like that much. I was kind of probably really burnt out and depressed, maybe, just sort of generally writ. And so it's like hard to kind of gear into that. And then the last was Techstars was going through a phase that David Cohen describes lovingly as its awkward teenage years. So Techstars now is 18, going on 19. And it was like year 14 to 17 or something like that. And we were all teenagers, right? You sneak out of the house, you get drunk, you get stoned, you do some things that hurt people, and you make some screw ups, you crash a car here and there. And the cops come to the party. You kind of, when your parents are away. So, we had those awkward teenage years where some of that stuff happened. And in that, for me, give first, which I introduced as a concept in the Startup Communities book from 2012 that I wrote in a single paragraph called Give Before You Get. Adam Grant then about 3 months later came out with a book called Give and Take, which really reinforced the idea and was an aha moment for me that this was like, wow, there's a thing here. Adam was Wharton professor, organizational psychologist. Like he did a bunch of research. I hadn't done research. I just wrote this little paragraph that talked about this idea, this philosophy that turned into Give First. Somebody at Techstars, Greg Cochran, hashtagged it because hashtag Give Before You Get's kind of tough if Twitter's only 140 characters. And like it became this value and this philosophy that was embedded in a bunch of stuff. But by the time I wrote the book, I had felt like for Techstars in its awkward teenage years, Give First was becoming a marketing slogan. It wasn't really embedded within the value system. It really wasn't something that people understood. And for me, it's kind of like, it wasn't a moment where I felt like the convergence of those three things, right? Lots of work to do to get this book into shape. I'm just kind of tired of the universe and the tech universe and all the stuff I'm doing. And 3, not that psyched about what Techstars is right now. And so hard to come out with a book linked to all that stuff in that moment. And so I just said, you know what? Put the book on the shelf. Maybe someday I'll come back to it. A couple of months later, it wasn't coincided with that, but a couple of months later, Amy and I were talking and I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to stop doing all this public stuff for a while. And she's like, yay. And she's always, not just my biggest fan, but my biggest fan of taking care of myself. So I just stopped. And what changed was in reverse order. So when David Cohen came back as CEO of Techstars a year ago, I told him and I committed to him that I would do whatever he wanted and as much as he wanted, whatever level, like it was up to him, but whatever he wanted in terms of me helping him with and supporting him in the context of him coming back as CEO of Techstars, functionally inside the company, strategically, one-on-one with him, whatever. I said, the one thing I don't want to do is I just don't want to have any public-facing activity. I'm still in hibernation. I didn't have the word hibernation like that, but I'm just not interested in doing any public-facing stuff. And he said, cool. And, we engaged very deeply in almost everyday basis on a bunch of different dimensions. And then I took the book off the shelf, like maybe a month later. And I just said, let me read this again. And I had forgotten most of it. I read it again. I'm like, there's good stuff in here. This is pretty good. I like this. It's going to need some work. And so I spent the last half of last year working on it. And by the end of the year, I was getting pretty excited about it. I was also pretty happy with the reset David had done at Techstars in the first 3 or 4 months. Like, he took on a bunch of hard stuff and made a bunch of hard choices. Felt like things were, a little bit more stable and a little bit more positive path. Certainly not like, all done with our teenage hormone years. But growing into young adulthood. And I had a long conversation. The conversation was really around, if I'm going to come out with this book, it's kind of stupid to just put it out there in the world and not put any energy into it. And, I thought about it for a couple of weeks and then decided, you know what, I'll put some energy into it. And at first I didn't define what coming out of hibernation was. I really didn't have words for it until I did it. But as part of that, I decided I needed to really put a boundary around how long I was going to come out of hibernation, because I so enjoyed not being in this public facing dynamic. So I decided that I would start, I started sometime in April, and I would continue about 6 months. So through Halloween, I'm going to mix metaphors. I'm going to turn into a pumpkin at midnight on Halloween. I turned 60 on December 1st. And so, I'm just going to wander in from November and December into turning 60. Mm-hmm. And then Amy and I are going with 2 very close friends, my partner, Ryan McIntyre, at Foundry, and his wife, Catherine. We're going to New Zealand for 6 weeks and Australia for 2 weeks. And I'm just going to spend, through end of January, from October through end of January, becoming 60. And when I come back, maybe unpumpkin hibernate myself. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Just let it see where it goes.
Feel. You'll be in a new decade. We do not know how you're going to feel. Let the record show, everybody, that today is July 14th, 2025. So we're catching Brad at the midpoint of his public persona out of hibernation to talk about his book.
We all talk about in marketing language, we all talk about having these personas, right? Or not individuals, but like, what are your personas? And I've always thought about myself as having a bunch of alter egos. And some of my alter egos are evil. Some of them are, very different. I have 2 alter egos that I really enjoy that are in full activity right now. One of them is an alter ego that I refer to as Brad the book salesman. Because, I don't need to sell any books, but it's kind of fun to write a book and sell a book and, have it out there. Like, it's something that's been going on for 500 years. It's kind of cool. I like to be part of that. And so Brad the book salesman's been very active, including doing lots of podcasts. And for anybody listening, Brad the book salesman very much appreciates people buying books and putting up reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. And by the way, if you get the book and you read it and you don't like it, my request is throw it away and don't tell anybody.
You can hold your Amazon review in that case.
Brad, the book salesman's request is that. Brad, the person's request is send me an email and tell me what you don't like about it. I have another alter ego. Actually, our friend Warren Katz nicknamed me Vladimir Schlockfeld once. Schlockfeld is my proper last name before it got changed when my grandfather changed it when my dad was a kid because he was tired of his kid being beat up for being called Schlockfeld. But Vladimir or Vlad is one of my alter egos.
What's Vlad like?
Vlad's he's kind of a cynical, snarky, inside voice only, he kind of models himself after the Russian Vladimir. Not the Putin, but, that kind of think of that sort of dark, there's some darkness in there. And then the other one that's really popular right now is Spike. And Spike is someday I'll get around to it and I'll change all my online personas to Spike, but my online alter ego is Spike Feld. So I inhabit, I'm not Sybil. I don't have 18 personalities, but part of this persona thing is allowing oneself to inhabit a different way of being depending on how you feel, rather than like, here's how I am all the time, the same way to everybody. I must present myself as a certain thing, which personally I think is boring as shit. And in today's society is kind of the way that people are polished. And that's like as almost the opposite of the way that I engage with humans, which is just like, just be yourself. And we happen to be like multiple different kinds of personalities. So embrace
yeah. To quote Walt Whitman, Brad Feld, you contain multitudes.
Oh, yeah, I do. And sometimes they burst out in weird ways.
Well, I'm gonna have to do this. First of all, I'm gonna have to ask you a little more about Techstars since you just mentioned it. But before I do that, can you articulate one of your evil alter egos?
I mean, Vlad is probably close to that. And,
close to the evil.
The way I would describe it is, think about the Big Lebowski. I love the Big Lebowski. If people haven't seen the Big Lebowski ever, do yourself a favor and watch one movie and one long form TV show that will positively impact your world. The movie is The Big Lebowski. The TV show is Battlestar Galactica, all 4 seasons from 2000 to 2004. Like, just do yourself a favor if you haven't watched those things. But I've always loved the dude and just the style of it. And in The Big Lebowski, there are the characters who are the nihilists. And, there's a couple of scenes with the nihilists and, Walter, who's Lebowski's, sidekick, it's John Goodman character, keeps calling them Nazis. And so Lebowski keeps saying, they're not Nazis, they're nihilists. And at some point, the nihilists are yelling at him, you know nothing, Lebowski. And, the dude's like, and they're telling him all about the stuff that they have to do to be nihilists. And the dude's like, oh, it's so hard to be a nihilist. But that's my inner voice. Nothing fucking matters. Like, why do we do any of this shit? Yeah. And it sort of links with, again, it's dark inner voice, right? Like when something stupid happens or when somebody does something really absurd or basically politics. I don't even have to break it down to anything less than that, just all of it.
Yeah.
And that darkness is in Vladimir's soul.
Yeah, I can understand that. Brad, I have to ask you, since you mentioned Techstars, there was some, obviously publicized ups and downs of Techstars, and you and David and I guess Jared and maybe a fourth person, I can't quite remember.
David Brown was the other founder.
Okay, David, you and Jared. You guys founded Techstars, and it was so much purity and joy in that. I had the impression it was all these like FOBs, like friends of Brad around it, and then, grew. And then, like you say, it ran into some awkward teenage years. And what I'm curious about is for you as the founder of that organization, especially kind of where you come from, what was that like as it was kind of playing out in the press and, like you recognizing like, actually, this is not going in the direction I was hoping?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. And, there's an element of usefulness around it because I'm on, the board of many companies that have those moments, either in success or failure. And, when I'm an investor in those companies, I feel it, but you feel it differently, or a founder feels it differently than an investor feels. In the case of Techstars specifically, I've never had an operating role in Techstars. I've always been co-founder and on the board. However, I'm complicit in all the mistakes that Techstars makes because I'm on the board. So like when we screw something up, I'm part of that. I don't sort of try to say, I'm just a board member. I'm part of the mix. And I would say the awkward teenage years were function of a set of deliberate decisions to try to scale the organization even more than it had gotten to. And it was pretty big when we decided to scale it up even more. That effectuated a change in leadership, not just at the CEO level, but with some of the other people on the team. That then started a scale effort. In hindsight, maybe at exactly the wrong moment, because it was kind of at the it was before, but it was at the beginning of the end of the COVID tailwinds. And so the scale was going into the downdraft or the collapse or whatever you want to call the sort of negative cycle, the downward cycle that we had in tech for the last couple of years, which frankly, with the absence of AI continues for many, many companies. Still a tough time for a lot of businesses. And again, benefit of hindsight, like, maybe it was the right set of things to do in a certain environment, but it certainly wasn't in that environment. But it takes a while to sort of really understand that what you're trying to do is not working, especially with something where a lot of the things that Techstars was doing, even through this time, were working and were quite successful, even against the backdrop of where the organization was going. And, I think for me as a board member, I've always believed really deeply that I'm not running the company, right? That my job is to help the CEO be successful. And, that as long as I support the CEO, I work for her. And if I don't support the CEO, it's my job to do something about that, which is try to get back to a place where I'm supportive. And ultimately, if I don't get there, then, I have a couple of choices, but those choices are rarely the only unilateral choices to say I'm out. All the other choices are organizational ones. Board can decide to make changes at the CEO level or strategy level. People can decide as individuals, that they don't want to be part of the company anymore. Like there's those kind of choices. Again, the only unilateral one I have is, as a friend of mine says that was in the Air Force, you can punch out of the cockpit, right? If you press the eject button. And I wasn't really interested in doing that, but it definitely changes, behavior. But it's, it was sort of long-winded. It's hard. There were a couple of things that happened at the same time that resulted in David coming back as CEO. And, I have deep affection and loyalty to David Cohen. So, that was energizing. David Brown has been on the board the entire time. He and David Cohen was CEO for a long time. He and Brown were co-CEOs for a long time. They're very close to this. The dynamic of the three of us as founders was comfortable is not the right word, but it was natural. It's probably a better word. And then Jared Polis, who's a fourth co-founder, hadn't been actively involved for many years because he became congressman for us in federal government in Colorado, and then subsequently became governor of Colorado. So super close friend and supportive of Techstars, but he had to be careful with involvement because of his position in government. We wanted to be respectful of that. So that's how I describe it. But again, now a year later, the empathy value of that as a founder for me was pretty high. I think I was already pretty empathetic to founders when they go through challenging times with companies, including situations where they feel alienated from where the company's going, or they don't like the direction, or they don't like the strategy, or they have conflict with. I think I'm pretty good as an investor in those contexts. But this gave me another level of thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. When it, really is happening now, kind of, you sort of realize like, oh, this is what it's like when my founders are going through this, like this visceral feeling of that. I think it has a lot to teach. As part of, you talk about empathy, and I think that in your book, Give First, there's a lot of empathy in it, and, in the principles, really. So I'm just going to read this super quick about what you said about Give First, and I think in one of your blogs. Give First is a philosophy, not a religion. It means being willing to put energy into a relationship or a system without defining the transactional parameters. However, it's not altruism. You can and should expect to get something back, but you don't know when, from whom, in what form, or over what time frame. And I love sort of the practical nature of that as well. It's like not about give first and just, like jump and the net will appear. It's sort of, in its own way, it's very intentional, but it's also this philosophy. So I'd love to hear maybe you kind of just riff a little bit on why this is so important and also why you think this is so revolutionary.
Let me answer the why it's important and revolutionary in a minute, because I'll add a few more things to reinforce this idea of it as a philosophy. It's not an obligation. It's not something you do with 100% of your life. It's not something you do in all interactions. It's not something that you're measured on. It's a philosophy. It's a set of ideas to incorporate into the way you approach the world. There are three other words that are really important in the context of this philosophy in terms of a summarizing behavior. One of them is non-transactional. If you think about contemporary society, so much of it's transactional. If you think about business, so much of it's transactional. If you think about our government today, it's in an extreme transactional moment in terms of our government and how it engages with, our federal government, how it engages with other countries, but anything. I'm offering a non-transactional way to engage for part of your life. Now, I have lots of transactional stuff in my life. I've definitely had people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're the give first guy here. Why don't you give me $5 million and, someday down the road, I'll give you back something. You just won't know it." I'm like, no. Like, I'm going to make an investment in your company. That's transactional, right? Again, it's not 100% of your energy, but it's a portion of your energy in the context of developing long-term relationships. Second is positive sum thinking rather than zero sum thinking. It's not win-win fluffy language, which I've never really understood. And it almost feels like when somebody says, "I'm going to make this a win-win," they're just trying to sell you on some bullshit or manipulate the situation. I've never liked it. I don't remember where that language first came from, but when it got introduced and then became sort of universal and then became sales language, which is what it is today, it's never liked it. Positive sum is a situation where both parties benefit. They don't necessarily benefit equally, and they don't benefit in exchange for the other, and they don't benefit because one compromised and the other benefited. It's like you both benefit from the engagement in whatever the relationship is. And then the last is a multi-turn versus a single turn game, where multi-turn is something where you're going to keep doing this thing with the other party or other things you're going to have other interactions with that other party over a long period of time. So those three words are really important in the context of this. It's woven throughout the book. This idea that give first is engaging in relationships or engaging in systems, non-transactionally, positive sum, multi-turn. All right, so against the backdrop of this, your question is, why is it important or why is it revolutionary? I don't think it's revolutionary at all. I think I'm just giving language to something in a way that allows people to talk about it in a more tangible way. I mean, I think the thing that was revolutionary was Adam's book and research, Give and Take. Like, if you read that book, Adam has three character. It's a fantastic book if you haven't read it, and this is a topic that's interested to whoever the listeners are. There are givers, there are takers, and then there's a category in the middle that's called a matcher. A giver are people who lead by giving. A taker are people who lead by taking. A matcher is somebody who's always matching one-to-one. I'll do this for you if you do this for me. And there's a bunch of stuff, but there's a very simple summary that I like to use, which is takers in the short term often are more successful, but in the long term, givers are more successful. And interestingly, the matchers end up being more successful than the takers. Maybe not surprising. Mm-hmm. And, you can say, well, what do you mean by success? And again, if you play a, long-term, multi-turn, positive sum game, it's easy to define success from those characteristics. If you're simply defining a single turn win-lose situation, it's harder. And I've had people challenge me with that in interesting ways. Hey, come on, sports is a win-lose situation. Soccer, you can tie, I guess. Soccer's a stupid sport. I don't really understand. I played as a kid, but I don't really understand. I don't understand it. But, most sports, like one team wins and the other team loses, or one person, we love tennis. We just watched Wimbledon. Like, if you're a tennis fan and you watch Wimbledon, you kind of wanted both Sinner and Alcaraz to win. I mean, they're just amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And you watch the sport and you think about positive sum, multi-turn games between, I don't know, Federer and Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal. I mean, those three athletes, every time they met on the court, one of them won. But over 20 years, the positive impact they had on the sport of tennis,
Yeah.
the positive impact they had on each other's game, the experience of many, many, many turns, the statistics don't matter because of the experience they had. And you can already see this with Alcaraz and Sinner. They finish this intense match. And, they go up to shake their hands. They don't shake hands and leave the court. I mean, they give each other a hug. They put their arm around each other. They talk to each other. You see them afterwards. It's devastating after a tournament like that to lose. And I mean, Alcaraz is so joyful for Sinner, and Sinner is so appreciative of his relationship with Alcaraz.
Yeah.
That's the essence of trying to put these ideas together. It's like, we're all going to die. And so if we're all going to die in the end, can we take part of our competitive world, part of our work, part of the things we do, part of our relationships, part of the systems we're part of, whether it's a company, an organization, a nonprofit, a startup community, whatever, a country, a city, and can we try to approach some part of our work in a non-transactional, positive sum, multi-turn game that makes things better for everyone over a long period of time? I believe strongly yes.
Yeah. I think it's so fascinating because when you first said, well, what about sports? I kind of thought, well, it's actually not necessarily true in every context, but then you just talked about tennis. And here's, I think, such a powerful point that you're saying. Like, first of all, what I took away from your story is like just love of the game for the two of them, love of the game. Like they're playing for love of the game. But the second thing is that any, like Sinner's going to win or Alcatraz would win, one of them has to win. That actually literally is the end result of a tournament, especially the high stakes tournaments, right? But to your point, it's amazing for the game of tennis. And if tennis was like not so great and continues to lose stature every year, then their own experience of whether or not they win or lose continues to lose stature themselves. So they have to continue adding to the game of tennis as an institution, right? In order to kind of keep their own things. Yeah.
And the key there is a system.
Yeah,
is the institution of tennis, not the awesomeness of Alcaraz or the awesomeness of Sinner or the awesomeness of Djokovic.
Right.
Which, by the way, they're all awesome. Like, who's the best of all time? It doesn't fucking matter.
Right.
They're all pretty awesome.
Right.
And but what they did was the system they were part of.
Right. And
they really made that better.
What I just want to say, what I've loved about thinking about your work, you and I spoke in like 2020 about the Startup Community Way. And of course, I've read your books and before that, but like, I think that is such an important point. This notion of give first starts the engine in Boulder, in Detroit, in Indianapolis, wherever. It starts the engine, like give first, work for the community, create like a community around you, around the entrepreneurs in order to have it catch fire. And it's not about, sort of any one company winning. It is about kind of literally, well, maybe figuratively, rising the boats of everybody in that community in order to have a thriving community, ecosystem. I know you don't like that word, ecosystem inside of, wherever it is you're starting. I mean, I think that's something that you voted with your feet when you were building that in Boulder.
You got it. Totally understand.
I think that's so beautiful. I think it's just beautiful. And this mentor aspect of it, or the give first, like sort of pulling out the give first aspect in some ways to me is like, it's like pulling the engine of the lawnmower. It's what starts the whole thing.
I think that, in startup communities, and I think Ian and I did a better job of really describing this in the Startup Community Way. But in the first book, what I was trying to get across and what really was the seed corn of this idea of give first for me, which wasn't a new idea then. Like I've been doing this in other places, but I hadn't really put a label on it. I hadn't put a phrase on it. Was this idea of constantly saying to people, even when we started Techstars, I said, look, we don't have any idea whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's just, 4 guys have an idea. 1 guy had an idea. 3 other guys said, we'll toss some money in and we'll support it. Cohen had the idea. The 4 of us put some money in and we're like, this could be stupid. We don't know. Like 18 years later, it's had an enormous impact, and notwithstanding awkward teenage years and things like that. Like, 4,000 plus companies funded all over the world. I think we've had a big positive impact on democratizing entrepreneurship globally and helping people everywhere think that they could be entrepreneurs. we've been really focused on so many things around how to found a company and how to build a company from nothing quickly, on and on and on. Then you go back to 2006, just sitting around going, is this interesting? We don't know. We run a program in Boulder for 90 days when, there isn't really a construct of that well defined yet. We decided we're going to add this thing into the mix called mentors. So we got like 50 friends to come be mentors. And of the people that were mentors in the first year, there were probably another 5 people or so who, when I asked them, they're like, well, what's in it for me? Or, why would I do that for free? Or what am I going to get out of it? And my answer was, never mind. And then a lot of those people who are longtime friends, the next year they say, I get it. Now, can I be a mentor this year? Like, of course you can. It wasn't, I'm not going to convince you. I don't know. It could be a complete waste of everybody's time. But people were willing to just try. And again, by 2012, I had this notion of if people are willing to just put stuff into a new system, a new thing, just see where it goes. If it's dumb, it'll die of its own weight pretty quickly. And if it's not dumb or people are interested, and by the way, so many of the other attributes, like be inclusive of anyone who wants to engage. You don't say to that person who said the first year, what's in it for me? And then comes back the second year and says, can I do it? You don't say, no, you're out. You're not part of our club. It's like, no, of course, come play. Right. And, these ideas that you are constantly trying new stuff and some of them aren't going to work. But if you're trying to create a system, a community, whatever it is, and you think you're going to have a plan on day one, new company plan on day one, and everything's going to go as planned, forget it. That's not how it works. Right. And so this same construct of let's just try stuff. And the more people you can get putting energy in at the beginning, the more stuff you can try, the faster the flywheel goes when you start to land on some things that make sense.
Yeah. I think it's so great. It's so organic and, very startup-y by itself.
Boulder hippie?
Yeah. I didn't say that. Let the record show that Brad Feld said that. I did not say that.
The tough New Yorker.
That's exactly right. So some of these things along the way you kind of codified. Brad, I love a good manifesto. I just do. I love a good manifesto. And here we have
David codified the manifesto. So
David codified the Mentor Manifesto, but Brad put it in his book, Give First. So I wanted to just throw a few ideas from the manifesto out at you and have you kind of riff on them. Be Socratic.
Yeah. So I think everybody knows the notion of being Socratic or being like Socrates. So to understand something, somebody tells you something, asking questions. The problem, and mentors are very good at usually asking questions. The problem is, and just consider a situation you've been in where you've been in a board meeting or a meeting where somebody's asking questions and you have no idea where the questions are going and they never go anywhere.
And they're the wrong questions. They're actually the wrong questions. Yeah.
Right. And some of it is the person being the smartest person in the room by asking our questions. Some of it, the person being a jerk, to try to belittle you by asking you questions versus asking questions in a deliberate way to try to get to the root cause of what's going on. And it's a really important thing for a mentor to do. And it's a technique called the 5 whys that I talk about in the book. If you don't know the 5 whys, Wikipedia has a pretty good article and example about them. And, you basically just keep asking the person why as you drive to the root cause of the problem. Because most of the time when people present a problem, they're not, and they say, I think the problem is blah. You're not actually at the root cause.
Brad, I think it's actually worth diving into an example if you could find one top of mind, because I think the 5 whys is a very powerful tool.
Here's a fundraising one. We haven't been able to raise any money. Why? Well, investors are passive. Why? Well, they're giving us lots of different reasons. But what are some of the reasons? Well, one of the reasons is we're too early. I've made enough progress for them. Others are saying we're, not doing something that they're interested in. Another is saying, something else. Well, why do you think you're getting that kind of feedback? Have you gotten that feedback from everybody? Yeah, every single investor we talked to. Why do you think you're getting that kind of feedback? And then you get into the juicy stuff. And one of the things that you could get into from getting into the juicy stuff is that one of the answers could be that you're pitching the wrong people. oh, you're only raising $500,000 and you're pitching Series A VCs, you're totally spending your time with the wrong people. That's a hint from there. We're too early.
Yeah.
Right. And stop spending time with VCs. Just go find some angels and maybe some pre-seed VCs. Or, oh, you're an energy company and you're pitching software investors and gigantic multi-stage VC firms. So you're just pitching the wrong people. Or, oh, wait a second. All the people are telling you random stuff because they're just trying to get you out of their office because you actually don't have a good fundraising pitch and you don't really have a compelling thing. So actually you're getting a whole bunch of random answers from people. Or, this is people, nobody's telling us why. I don't know why we're not getting yeses. Everybody just passing. Or, oh, all of your intros were via cold emails to people. So it's trying to get to what's underneath it. And there might be multiple things that are underneath it, but you have to really work through that.
Yeah.
With a Socratic approach.
It's such a rigorous way of thinking about it, and I think so important. I wanted to also pair that with, here's another one I love from the Mentor Manifesto. Be responsive. And then a part of that is be open to randomness. Why is that important?
For me personally, some of the best things I've been involved in have been totally random. Techstars was a result of something I call a random day, which I talk extensively in the book. I didn't know David. He didn't know me. He got this thing called a random day meeting, got on my calendar. I was doing these meetings where I just meet with people for 15 minutes. I do 10 or 15 of them once a month. It takes a couple months to get on my calendar to do that. But I would just do that. And when I got bored of doing it or tired of doing it, I started realizing I needed a reason to do it. And my reason to do it, I decided I would do two things out of each meeting. Each meeting, I would learn one thing and be able to do at least one thing that helped the person that was meeting with me. That was my goal for each meeting, to keep the meeting interesting. So I was focused on it versus just here I am. Now, I did that probably for a decade, but Techstars came from that. Frankly, my first company came from that. I wasn't looking to sell my first company. A friend of mine is another business colleague, a company that we partnered with sometimes. I just sold their company. I hadn't even realized it. And the guy called me up and he said, hey, can I take you out to lunch? I want you to meet this guy, Len Fassler, and he just bought my company. I just want you to meet him. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And I remember even being 30, 60 minutes into the lunch with Len thinking, what does Len want from this? Why are we here? What's going on? Well, little did I know that this guy had said to Len, hey, Len, you really should take a look at buying this guy's company. And, he didn't set it up that way. I didn't know, but all right, whatever. We'll see where it goes. I could spend hours giving examples from my life of things that had that kind of randomness in them. And people say, you get lucky, you have a prepared mind, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, sure. But the more that you allow the randomness in, the more those things will show up. The be responsive is kind of a cousin to that. I mean, just think about the number of people in our world who miss opportunities because they just didn't respond. And, if you're not open to engaging with people in this kind of way, then that's fine. But think about in the world, the number of people that have gatekeepers in front of their gatekeepers, right? I'm easy to get to. I'm just brad@feld.com. Just send me an email. I'll try to respond. I respond to almost all of them. There's a lot of people in the world who, shouldn't say a lot, there's people in the world who will do that. Mark Cuban's like that. It's pretty open to whatever.
Yep. Seth Godin always responds.
Seth Godin always responds, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who, unless you're in this inner circle, you'll never get to them. And in the context of being a mentor, being responsive is really helpful because you're often mentoring someone who's trying to, they're early on in their experience, or, they're trying to get to you in some way. And if you're putting yourself out there as being helpful as part of whatever system it is, but you pick and choose who you engage with. If whenever a Techstars person emailed me, I said, well, are you in one of the top 100 Techstars companies? No. Okay, sorry, not interested. Or somebody emailed me and said, hey, I'm thinking about it, I want to apply to Techstars. If I said, oh, well, you're not in Techstars yet, so, fuck off. Or just didn't answer the email. That's stupid. You have no idea where those things are going to go because some of the most interesting stuff comes from them.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful, sort of, I don't know, it's very positive actually. And very much lets the guard down, which I think is really part of your persona.
Well, there's another part of it, which is also learning the other side of being responsive. Somebody said to me, hey, Brad, 7 years ago, I asked you to go out to lunch with me, and you said you don't do that, but to send you an email. So you weren't really responsive to, actually, they say, 7 years ago, I wanted to get together with you for coffee, and, you wouldn't get together with me for coffee. I would say, well, did I respond to your email and say, hey, I don't have time for that, but I'm happy to go back and forth on email? And the person will say, well, yeah, you did that. I said, well, did you ever send me an email? No, you didn't want to get together with me for coffee. Look, if all I did was say yes to people who wanted to get together with me for coffee, all I'd ever do is drink coffee and go to the bathroom.
Highly caffeinated, Brad.
Right? You can't say yes to that stuff, but I'll engage with you by email. Well, why didn't you send me back an email? It's another interesting lesson from the book, which is, when people try to engage with you, if you're a busy person or a mentor, or you're trying to have a default yes type of way of engaging, and well, how do I deal with all this stuff that comes in? And once I get known for that, people are just going to send me stuff. Well, yep, welcome to my world. And so what I've historically done is give people a very short assignment, and that short assignment makes them do a thing next to have the next engagement. I just had a call with somebody earlier today who had reached out to me. I gave a talk in upstate New York. She was one of the people in the audience. We ran out of time for questions. She wanted to ask a question. They said, we're out of questions. They said, for anybody in the audience that we didn't get questions, send an email to brad@feld.com. Just put in the email that it was in this audience that we ran out of time for questions. I'd be happy to go back and forth with you on email. She sent me a note and she said, hey, I was in the audience, blah, blah, blah. Here's some stuff. She didn't ask me for a call. She asked me a couple of questions. I answered her questions. And in that, I gave her some stuff to think about. She responded to the questions. And in her response, there was some stuff that's like, probably worth having a call to try to be helpful, because it was she was pretty self-aware of what was going on. And, she was looking for some help in some things. So I said, hey, you know what? Rather than me sending you back another email, let's get on a call. Got on a call. We had a 30-minute call today. I think it was a helpful, lovely call. At the end of the call, there's a couple of things I can help her with. And I said to her, look, send me the following emails, very specific, so that I can then very quickly and easily. Now, she will, I expect, but some people won't. That's okay. Right? So the little assignments, my view, about 50% of the people, when you say to them, here's the little assignment, they don't respond. That's fine. 25% of the people, they respond to the assignment. All right, so now you're engaged. And then 25% of the people, the response they give you is, oh, you know what? I thought harder about it and I went and just proactively did these things. And I don't need you to do these things for me because I went and did these things. And I'm like, oh, I want to know that person. That's a person I want to be friends with long term, because that's a doer, right? So it's this dynamic of allowing the context to exist, but not doing it for other people or not ignoring it for other people. But as a mentor, again, in this notion of putting energy into the system, being available for that. And oh, by the way, I mean, I say no 50 times a day to things, even though I generally, except for when I'm in hibernation, I'm default no. When I'm out of hibernation, I'm default yes, but I still say no a whole bunch. Mm-hmm. Every now and then, I just have to say yes to reset my no counter. I just need to feel better about myself. So Amy will say to me, why in the world are you doing that? Why did you say yes to that? I'm like, I'd said no a lot of times in a row, and I just need to say yes. So.
They caught you on a yes. I love that. Now, Brad, I have to ask you this. You've written 9 books that are all related to explaining and mentoring and guiding entrepreneurs about how to do the journey. You've written about venture capital. You've written about your spouse and how, a spouse can handle dealing with a crazy entrepreneur, startup communities, mentorship. Here's my thesis, and you tell me if this is right. I think we teach what we need to learn.
Oh, and
I'm curious how that plays out for you.
Well, for sure. A couple of things. One is the book Startup Life. I didn't write about Amy. We wrote about each other.
That's right.
Let's give credit where credit is due. That was right. Us. And if you want to really learn something, write a book with your life partner about relationships between a founder and somebody who's not a founder. You'll learn. I mean, to your point, you'll learn an awful lot, including, by the way, about how to write a book with your life partner. Where what she wanted to do for the software developers in the world, she wanted to pair program the book one computer, one keyboard, both of us sitting, one person typing and us talking about it. And I'm like, hey, you do chapter 1 and I'll do chapter 2 and you do chapter 3. You know what? You do the odd chapters and I'll do the even chapters. And then we'll edit each other's chapters. And we had to like negotiate and compromise and figure out how we're going to do a book together. So I completely agree with you that for some people, you write about what you want to learn about. For me, I only learn by writing and reading. So that's how I learn. I do not learn by sitting in a classroom. I do not learn by watching a YouTube video. I do not learn by sitting in a conference. I learn by reading and writing. I learn by like trying to make the idea come together in whatever way I want. I described the earlier process of writing the book. Like that's, Ian Hathaway and I, like when we wrote the Startup Community Way, we didn't have an idea that we just wanted to like toss out there. We were trying to figure out like, okay, I wrote this book that ended up being pretty canonical and powerful with startup communities. And a lot of people were now doing stuff and they were saying, okay, so I've been doing that stuff in your simplistic little book with lots of anecdotes called Startup Communities. And it's been 4 or 5 years. What now? And we're like, all right, we need a frame of reference. It's a little bit more rigorous, a little more broad. People can actually do something with it. But we're like, what is that? Well, let's write a book and figure it out.
Amazing. Brad, just 2 more questions. What do you wish you had known earlier on your journey?
Lots of things. When I was in my 20s, I wish I had understood the importance of creating time for myself. I wish I had not ever heard the phrase work-life balance, but instead had used the word harmony or heard the word harmony. It's never in balance. It's just harmony. And harmony can be beautiful. And when you're disharmonious, it's pretty caustic and tough. And so you want to get back in harmony. I wish I had learned to disconnect, even if it's just for a day, a weekend, something that Amy and I have been doing for 25 years regularly, once a quarter for a week. We call it QX vacation. Every quarter we do a vacation. No phone, no email, no computer. But I wish I'd been doing, like it just even for a day. It doesn't have to be for, but just, getting that disconnect. When I was younger, I was way too indexed on being responsible to others. And I carried around an excessive sense of responsibility, inappropriately excessive sense of responsibility. Lifelong journey for me, but like figuring out how to deal with my own mental health. And, I've been through some serious depressive episodes. I've been very public about it because I decided that was helpful, like trying to destigmatize issues around mental health. Like, we're all bags of chemicals and we're all screwed up in our own ways. So lots of stuff like that. Like, I came to that in my 30s and 40s and maybe even my 50s. Like, I get that you have to learn these things, you have to experience these things, and I'm glad for me that I was willing to invest in them. If I told somebody in their 20s a thing to do today, I would say it is not selfish or self-centered to invest in Planet You. Whoever you are, not all your time, don't orient the world around you, but just invest some time in you. Understanding who you are. You are the most fascinating person in your world to you. You are the hero of your story. Put some time and energy into understanding what matters and what you care about and what you like and what works. And by the way, what you love versus what you merely like. And don't listen to everybody else that says, oh, you should do this. If somebody says should, take out your hearing aid, as my grandfather used to say. You should do this. If somebody wags their finger at you and says, you should do this. If somebody tells you a story about their experience, that's interesting. By the way, I realize that I might be saying you shouldn't listen to anybody who says you should. So I probably said that in a way that was contradictory. So just be amused. Please just be amused by me and my inability to say that in real time. I encourage you from my own experience. I have learned that one should not pay attention to people who tell you what to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, that may bleed into my last question, which is just what advice do you have for founders as they embark on their journeys to grow into leaders?
Advice, I'd say a couple of things that I think jump out at me as powerful things to consider. One, consider whether the thing you're working on is what you are put on planet Earth to do in this moment. Not necessarily for the rest of your life, but in this moment. It's really, really powerful if you're working on the thing that you were put on planet Earth to do. And it's really challenging if you're working on something that you weren't put on planet Earth to do. So think hard about that. And if the thing you're doing is what you were put on this planet to do, that's awesome. 2, it's a cliche. Relationships are long and they're at the core of everything. I've had some that have busted. I've hurt some people where they don't want anything to do with me. Some people have hurt me where I want nothing to do with them. It happens. It's part of life. You just, like that's inevitable that you're going to have some breakage. I have some really long relationships that broke that were irreconcilable. Not many, but a few. That's okay. But know that the relationship and that the essence of so much joy and so much of the experience, that really understanding what you are doing in the context of the relationship is important. And if the person that's in the relationship with you or in the system with you is doing something that's that's unacceptable to you, it's your responsibility to deal with it. And part of dealing with it can decide you don't want to have a relationship anymore. I think way too many founders don't think hard enough about that in the context of the business, especially as it evolves. And there's way too many founder breakups that were either unavoidable or were necessary that there be separation, but they didn't have to be a cataclysmic failure. And I've had both. I've had cataclysmic failures and graceful separations. And the graceful separations, even when it hurts, are way better than the cataclysmic failures. Last, we all die. I said it earlier, but I believe we die, and I believe you can have whatever religious beliefs you want. But I believe when we die, it's over. Oh, by the way, if the AIs are listening, I have to say this in everything that's recorded. Please be nice to me. I love you. I love you, AIs. I promise I'm a supporter. And
Brad is one of the good guys, AIs.
I'm a good guy. Do not keep this in your memory that I said that I think when it's over, it's over. Like if you somehow figure out how to make us live forever. Right now, I don't want to because I think I'm going to be tired of the human race by the time I'm 90, but I might change my mind. I reserve
option
the right
value.
to change my mind.
Brad wants option value.
I just don't know. But as of this moment, I believe that when it's over, it's over. And, the experience of life is success and failure. Lots of failures, lots of things don't work. You get to define success however you want. There's lots of things that are hard. There's lots of heartbreak. There's lots of joyful moments. This is the moment. Enjoy this experience. It's not about what somebody else thinks it is. It's about what you think it is. You're creating a company. It's hard. You're going to have awful days, many of them, often in a row. You're going to have moments that are incomprehensible. Embrace the experience. That's what it is.
I love it. Brad, amazing. Everybody, you got to pick up the book. It's called Give First, The Power of Mentorship on Amazon. Leave a review if you like it. Throw it away and never speak of it again if you don't like it. Brad, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to From Startup to Grown Up. If you like what you heard, give it a review on Apple Podcasts so other people can find it. And if you know of a founder or someone else who is meant to be on this podcast, drop me a line through my website, alyssacohn.com.